November 4, 1942. The Egyptian desert at dawn. A British tank commander stands in his turret, binoculars pressed to his eyes, watching the horizon. What he sees makes him freeze. The entire German Afrika Korps, Rommel's legendary fighting force, is retreating. Not withdrawing tactically. Not repositioning. Retreating in chaos. Vehicles abandoned. Tanks out of fuel. Men stumbling westward through sand. In 2 years of desert warfare, no Allied commander had managed this. Not Wavell. Not Auchinleck. Not Cunningham. Rommel, the desert fox, the general who had humiliated British forces again and again, was running. Behind that retreating German army stood one man. A quiet, meticulous British general who didn't look like a warrior. No swagger. No theatrical confidence. Just cold calculation and an obsessive attention to detail. His name was Bernard Montgomery. And this is the story of how he did what every other Allied general in North Africa had failed to do. He broke Erwin Rommel. But to understand how he won, we have to go back. Back to when the British were losing. Back to when Rommel seemed unstoppable. Back to the summer of 1942, when the Eighth Army was on the edge of collapse and Egypt itself hung in the balance. The crisis, summer 1942, June 1942. The situation in North Africa was catastrophic. Rommel's Afrika Korps had just captured Tobruk, a fortress the British had defended for 8 months the previous year. This time, it fell in a single day. 33,000 British and Commonwealth troops surrendered. Mountains of supplies fell into German hands. Fuel. Ammunition. Food. Vehicles. Everything Rommel needed to keep driving east toward Egypt, toward the Suez Canal, toward the oil fields of the Middle East. In London, Winston Churchill received the news while visiting Roosevelt in Washington. An aide handed him a telegram. Churchill read it, his face gray. He turned to Roosevelt and said simply, "Tobruk has fallen." Roosevelt, seeing Churchill's shock, asked what Britain needed. "As many Sherman tanks as you can spare," Churchill replied. It was one of the darkest moments of his premiership. The defeat sent shockwaves through the British Empire. Newspapers questioned whether Britain could hold Egypt. In Cairo, British officials burned documents, preparing for evacuation. Smoke from embassy bonfires drifted across the city. Egyptians watched nervously, wondering if German tanks would soon roll down their streets. Rommel, energized by victory, didn't pause. He drove his forces 400 kilometers east in 3 weeks, pushing the British back toward the Egyptian frontier. His panzers seemed invincible. His tactical instincts, honed in France and perfected in Africa, allowed him to strike where enemies were weakest, exploit gaps before they could close, and vanish before counterattacks materialized. British commanders struggled to predict him. He attacked when conventional wisdom said he should defend. He retreated when victory seemed within grasp, only to reappear on a different flank. Fighting Rommel felt like boxing a shadow. You prepared for a strike from the left, and he hit you from the right. By late June, the British Eighth Army had fallen back to a small railway station called El Alamein, just 100 kilometers from Alexandria. Here, finally, geography favored defense. The position was narrow, bounded by the Mediterranean Sea to the north and the impassable Qattara Depression to the south. Only 60 kilometers of front. Rommel couldn't use his favorite tactic of sweeping around southern flanks through open desert. He would have to attack frontally. But the Eighth Army was shattered. Units had been battered for weeks. Men were exhausted. Equipment was worn out or destroyed. Morale was broken. Soldiers joked bitterly about Rommel's bus service, the fast, chaotic retreats that had become their routine. Officers had lost confidence. They expected orders to retreat further, perhaps all the way to the Suez Canal or even Palestine. General Claude Auchinleck, the British theatre commander, took direct control of 8th Army and stabilized the front in July through sheer determination. In the First Battle of El Alamein, he stopped Rommel's advance. But stopping wasn't enough. Churchill wanted offensive action. He wanted Rommel thrown out of Egypt. Auchinleck said his forces needed months to rebuild before any major attack. Churchill, under immense political pressure, decided he needed new commanders. In early August 1942, Churchill flew to Cairo personally. He met with his generals, assessed the situation, and made a decision that would alter the course of the North African campaign. He appointed General Harold Alexander as theater commander and selected Bernard Montgomery to lead 8th Army. Montgomery was 54 years old, a career infantry officer with a reputation for thorough preparation and tactical orthodoxy. He had commanded a division in France in 1940 and performed well during the Dunkirk evacuation. But he was not an obvious choice for desert warfare. He had no experience in North Africa. He had never faced Rommel. He was known as prickly, difficult, and supremely confident in his own judgment, not always a popular combination. When Montgomery flew into Cairo on August 12, the situation he inherited was dire. The 8th Army had suffered 80,000 casualties in the past 6 months. Tank strength was depleted. The men expected another defeat. Some units were already planning further withdrawals. Montgomery's first action was to cancel all retreat plans. He gathered his senior officers and delivered a simple message: there will be no withdrawal. We will fight where we stand. If we cannot stay here alive, we will stay here dead. The bluntness shocked some officers, but it sent a clear signal. The running was over. He then did something unusual. He visited every major unit in the army personally. Not quick courtesy calls. He climbed onto jeep hoods, gathered hundreds of soldiers around him, and talked to them directly. He told them they had been poorly led. That wasn't their fault. He told them the retreat was finished. They would train, prepare, and when ready, attack. He told them they would beat Rommel. Not maybe. Would. Soldiers, accustomed to distant commanders who issued orders from headquarters, found this directness startling. Montgomery wasn't charismatic in a traditional sense. His voice was sharp, his manner schoolmasterish. But he projected absolute certainty. In an army that had lost confidence, certainty was oxygen. Behind the speeches, Montgomery began restructuring 8th Army methodically. He studied every previous battle against Rommel, noting patterns. Rommel thrived when British forces were scattered, allowing him to defeat them piecemeal. So Montgomery concentrated his forces. Rommel exploited hesitant commanders. So Montgomery centralized command, making himself the sole decision-maker. Rommel struck at night or during sandstorms when coordination was difficult. So Montgomery emphasized training under those exact conditions. Most critically, Montgomery studied Rommel's logistics. The German supply line stretched 2,000 kilometers from Tripoli in Libya back to European ports, then across the Mediterranean under constant attack by British aircraft and submarines. Every tank, every shell, every liter of fuel had to survive that gauntlet. Rommel's brilliant tactics couldn't overcome supply shortages. Montgomery, by contrast, had a short supply line from Alexandria and the Suez Canal, connected to the vast industrial output of Britain and America. Hundreds of new tanks were arriving, American Shermans with 75mm guns that could finally match German armor. Artillery pieces, ammunition stockpiles, supplies of all kinds poured into Egypt. Montgomery decided his strategy: he would not try to outmaneuver Rommel. He would outprepare him. He would build such overwhelming force that Rommel's tactical genius would become irrelevant. He would force Rommel to fight the kind of grinding, attritional battle that favored British strengths, industrial capacity and firepower, over German strengths, tactical speed and improvisation. But first, he had to survive Rommel's next attack. Because German intelligence had noted the British command changes and Rommel, sensing opportunity, was preparing to strike. The test. By late August 1942, Rommel faced his own crisis. German and Italian forces were running dangerously low on fuel. Supply convoys were being sunk in the Mediterranean faster than they could be replaced. If Rommel didn't break through soon, he would lose the initiative entirely. He planned one more offensive, targeting a ridge called Alamein, south of the main British lines. His plan followed his classic pattern, a feint in the north to draw British attention, then a massive armored strike south through weak positions, sweeping around to cut off 8th Army from its supply bases. German intelligence reported that the new British commander had just arrived and wouldn't have time to prepare adequate defenses. Rommel expected to face the same disorganized resistance he had encountered before. He was wrong. Montgomery had inherited detailed intelligence reports warning of Rommel's likely attack plan. Previous commanders had responded by trying to defend everywhere, spreading forces thin. Montgomery did the opposite. He identified where Rommel would most likely strike, the Alamein ridge, and turned it into a fortress. He positioned his best units there, dug in behind minefields, with artillery pre-registered on every approach route. He placed his tank reserves on the reverse slope of the ridge, hidden from German observation but ready to counterattack. He ordered his armor commanders not to chase retreating Germans, a tactic Rommel used to lure British tanks into traps. They would hold position, let Rommel come to them, and destroy his forces through firepower. On the night of August 30th, Rommel launched his attack. The southern thrust began after midnight. German and Italian armor advanced through British minefields under heavy artillery fire. By dawn, they had broken through initial positions and were swinging north toward Alamein, exactly as Montgomery had predicted. Then they hit the prepared defenses. British artillery opened up from carefully surveyed positions. Shells rained down with devastating accuracy. German tanks pushed forward, trying to find weak points, but everywhere they probed, they met dug-in positions, hull-down tanks, and withering fire. Rommel expected British tanks to charge forward recklessly, as they often had before. Instead, they stayed put, firing from protected positions. Frustrated, Rommel committed more forces, trying to break through by sheer weight. But his tanks were burning fuel at an alarming rate, and casualties were mounting. For 6 days, the battle raged. Rommel probed, attacked, and tried every tactical trick in his repertoire. Nothing worked. Montgomery refused to be baited. He let Rommel exhaust himself against defenses that wouldn't break. By September 3, Rommel's fuel situation was critical. His tanks were running dry. He had gained no significant ground. British positions remained intact. For the first time in the North African campaign, Rommel had no choice but to withdraw without achieving any objective. Montgomery, true to his orders, didn't pursue aggressively. His tanks stayed in position. His infantry held the line. He had won by refusing to fight Rommel's kind of battle. The Battle of Alamein was not spectacular. There were no dramatic breakthroughs, no sweeping movements. But its significance was profound. For the first time, Rommel had attacked and been decisively repelled. For the first time, a British commander had predicted Rommel's moves and prepared accordingly. For the first time, the 8th Army had fought exactly according to plan and won. Soldiers who had grown accustomed to defeat and retreat suddenly realized something had changed. Their new commander had promised they would stop Rommel. And they had. Morale began to shift. Men started believing victory was possible. Montgomery didn't celebrate. He immediately began planning the next phase. Alamein had been defensive. Now he would go on the offensive. But he would do it his way, on his timeline, when he was ready. Not before. Churchill, watching from London, grew impatient. He sent messages urging immediate attack. Montgomery politely ignored them. He had a plan, and he would not be rushed. The build-up, preparing for battle, from early September through October 1942, Montgomery transformed the 8th Army. Reinforcements arrived from Britain, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and India. New equipment poured in, hundreds of Sherman tanks, self-propelled artillery, and thousands of trucks. But Montgomery knew equipment alone wouldn't win. He needed to change how the army thought and fought. He instituted intensive training programs. Tank crews practiced coordinated attacks with infantry. Artillery units rehearsed complex fire plans. Engineers trained in mine clearing under combat conditions. Montgomery personally oversaw planning for the coming offensive, codenamed Operation Lightfoot. His concept was methodical and deliberate. He would attack in the north, where German and Italian defenses were strongest, but also where success would directly threaten Rommel's coastal supply road. He would not try clever flanking maneuvers. He would punch straight through. The plan had 4 phases. First, a massive artillery bombardment to stun defenders. Second, infantry would advance under darkness, clearing paths through minefields. Third, engineers would widen those paths for armor to pass through. Fourth, tanks would break into open ground and destroy German reserves in mobile combat. It was not a subtle plan. It relied on overwhelming force, careful coordination, and sheer persistence. Montgomery expected heavy casualties and a long, grinding battle. But he believed British industrial and manpower advantages would prevail. While Montgomery prepared, Rommel faced deteriorating conditions. Fuel shortages limited training and mobility. Food supplies dwindled. Reinforcements were promised but rarely arrived. Hitler, focused on the Eastern Front and Stalingrad, gave North Africa lower priority. Rommel's health was also failing. Months of desert warfare had left him exhausted and suffering from jaundice and stomach ailments. In late September, Hitler ordered him back to Germany for medical treatment. Rommel reluctantly departed, leaving General George Stumm in temporary command. German intelligence detected the British buildup but underestimated its scale. They knew an attack was coming but believed it would target the southern sector. Montgomery's deception plans, which included fake supply dumps and dummy tanks in the south, worked perfectly. By mid-October, the 8th Army had assembled an overwhelming force, 195,000 men, 1,029 tanks, 2,311 artillery pieces, and 750 aircraft. Facing them were 115,000 German and Italian troops, 559 tanks, and 1,219 guns. More critically, Rommel's forces had only enough fuel for 11 days of operations, while British supplies were virtually unlimited. Montgomery addressed his troops one final time before battle. He told them this would not be easy. There would be hard fighting and losses. But they were better prepared, better equipped, and better led than ever before. They would win. On the evening of October 23, 1942, under a bright full moon, the 8th Army prepared to attack. The battle, Alamein, at 9:40 p.m. on October 23, the desert night exploded. 900 British guns opened fire simultaneously, the largest artillery bombardment since World War I. For 15 minutes, shells rained down on German and Italian positions. The ground shook. The noise was deafening. Men in forward trenches could do nothing but huddle and pray. Then, at 10 p.m., the bombardment shifted to deeper targets. British and Commonwealth infantry rose from their positions and began advancing. 4 divisions moved forward on a 10-kilometer front. Ahead of them lay dense minefields, more than 500,000 mines laid by both sides over months of fighting. Engineers moved ahead with metal detectors, marking safe paths with white tape. Infantry followed, probing forward through dust and darkness. German defenders, recovering from the bombardment, opened fire. Tracer rounds cut through the night. Machine guns chattered. Mortars thumped. The advance was slow, brutal work. Men crawled through minefields under fire, clearing obstacles, fighting bunker to bunker. Casualties mounted. But the infantry kept pushing. By dawn, they had penetrated several kilometers into German defenses, creating corridors for armor to exploit. The armored divisions moved forward, expecting to break through into open ground. Instead, they encountered stronger resistance than anticipated. German anti-tank guns, dug in and camouflaged, knocked out British tanks at close range. The breakthrough stalled. In the German headquarters, General Stumm had driven forward to assess the situation personally. His vehicle came under fire. Stumm suffered a heart attack and fell from the car, dying in the sand. The Afrika Korps was suddenly without a commander at the critical moment. Hitler immediately ordered Rommel back to Africa. Rommel, still weak and ill, flew through the night, arriving on October 25. He found his forces under immense pressure, supplies critically low, and no strategic reserves available. Montgomery, surveying the battle, realized his initial breakthrough plan had failed. The German defense was deeper and more resilient than expected. A lesser commander might have panicked or called off the offensive. Montgomery simply adjusted. This would take longer than planned. Fine. He had the resources. He would grind through. For the next week, the battle became a brutal attritional struggle. Montgomery launched attack after attack, probing for weaknesses, forcing Rommel to commit his dwindling reserves. Each attack cost British tanks and men, but they could be replaced. Rommel's losses were irreplaceable. Rommel fought brilliantly, shifting his limited forces to plug gaps, counterattacking where British pressure seemed strongest. His tactical skill kept the defense together. But skill couldn't create fuel. Skill couldn't summon ammunition that didn't exist. By November 1, Rommel's situation was desperate. His army had been under continuous attack for 9 days. Fuel was almost gone. Italian infantry divisions, poorly equipped and supplied, were collapsing. German units were worn to shadows of their original strength. Montgomery prepared one final blow. He shifted his focus slightly north, to a sector called Tel El Akakar, where defenses were weakest. On the night of November 2, he launched Operation Supercharge, a concentrated armored and infantry assault on a narrow front. British tanks and infantry punched through. German defenders fought tenaciously, but they had nothing left. Anti-tank guns ran out of ammunition. Tanks ran out of fuel and fought as stationary pillboxes until destroyed. By the afternoon of November 3, the German line was breaking. Rommel, facing annihilation, made the hardest decision of his career. He ordered a full retreat. The Afrika Korps, which had never been decisively beaten in open battle, was withdrawing from Egypt. Hitler, when informed, sent an order: stand and fight to the last man. Rommel ignored it. If he obeyed, his entire army would be destroyed. He continued the retreat. On November 4, British forces broke into open ground. Ahead of them, the German army streamed westward in disarray. Vehicles abandoned for lack of fuel littered the desert. Thousands of Italian soldiers, left behind because there was no transport, surrendered. Montgomery ordered his forces forward, but cautiously. He remembered how previous British victories had turned into disasters when pursuits became overextended. He advanced methodically, keeping supply lines intact, refusing to outrun his logistics. Rommel managed to extract the core of his German forces, retreating 1,000 kilometers across Libya. But the Afrika Korps was shattered. It would never again threaten Egypt. The aftermath, victory and legacy. The Second Battle of El Alamein cost the 8th Army 13,500 casualties, 2,350 killed, 8,950 wounded, and 2,260 missing. They destroyed or captured 450 German and Italian tanks, 1,000 guns, and took 30,000 prisoners. Rommel's army, which had numbered 115,000 men at the battle's start, was reduced to fewer than 60,000 effective troops. More importantly, the myth of Rommel's invincibility was broken. For 2 years, his name had been synonymous with desert warfare mastery. British commanders had feared him, sometimes irrationally. Now, he had been comprehensively defeated by a methodical, unglamorous British general who refused to fight on Rommel's terms. Churchill, addressing the House of Commons, famously said, "Before Alamein we never had a victory. After Alamein we never had a defeat." It was political rhetoric, but contained essential truth. Alamein was the turning point for British fortunes in the war. Montgomery became a national hero overnight. King George VI awarded him a knighthood. The press celebrated him. His distinctive beret and confident manner became iconic. He had given Britain something desperately needed, a winning general and proof that German commanders could be beaten. After the war, military historians debated Montgomery's performance. Critics pointed out the battle took longer than planned and British casualties were higher than necessary. Some argued a more aggressive commander would have destroyed Rommel's entire army, not just pushed it back. But these criticisms missed the essential point. Montgomery understood his mission was not to take risks or demonstrate tactical flair. His mission was to win decisively, restore Eighth Army's confidence, and do so in a way that wouldn't risk catastrophic defeat. He succeeded completely. Rommel himself, in letters and later conversations, acknowledged Montgomery's skill. After the war, Rommel's former chief of staff, General Fritz Bayerlein, said, "Montgomery didn't outfight us. He outthought us. He refused to play our game, and when we had no choice but to play his, we lost." The battle also demonstrated the importance of logistics and industrial capacity in modern warfare. Rommel's tactical brilliance couldn't overcome fundamental supply shortages. Montgomery's careful preparation, backed by Allied production, created advantages no amount of battlefield genius could counter. Alamein had strategic consequences beyond North Africa. Just days after Montgomery's victory, American and British forces landed in Morocco and Algeria as part of Operation Torch. Rommel was now caught between two Allied armies. The Axis position in Africa became untenable. By May 1943, all German and Italian forces in North Africa surrendered, 250,000 men, a disaster comparable to Stalingrad. The Mediterranean was reopened to Allied shipping. The invasion of Sicily and Italy became possible. Hitler's dream of conquering the Middle East and its oil fields died in the Egyptian desert. Montgomery went on to command British forces in the invasion of Sicily and Italy, then led 21st Army Group in the Normandy invasion and the drive into Germany. He ended the war as one of the most famous and successful Allied commanders. But it was at Alamein, in those 12 days in October and November 1942, that he truly made his mark. He took a demoralized, defeated army and turned it into a winning force. He faced the most celebrated German general of the war and beat him thoroughly. Montgomery did not do it with flash or daring. He did it with preparation, concentration of force, and refusing to fight on the enemy's terms. He proved that in modern industrial warfare, methodical planning backed by superior resources could defeat tactical brilliance. The British finally had their victory. And the Desert Fox had met his match. In the decades after the war, Rommel's reputation endured as a brilliant tactician and, for a German officer, a relatively honorable one. But his North African campaign, studied in military academies, is often taught as a cautionary tale. Tactical success without strategic logistics leads to inevitable defeat. Montgomery's legacy is more controversial. He was difficult, arrogant, and often dismissive of colleagues. But he was also one of the few Allied generals who consistently defeated German forces in direct combat. His meticulous approach saved countless lives and delivered victories when Britain desperately needed them. Alamein stands as a testament to a simple truth: in war, the general who refuses to fight the enemy's battle and instead imposes his own terms often wins. Rommel wanted speed, maneuver, and chaos. Montgomery gave him attrition, firepower, and patience. And in the sands of Egypt, patience prevailed. The Desert Fox had finally been broken.